In a packed Madison Square Garden, where the lights glowed like the stage of destiny itself, two men walked forward, carrying the weight of expectation and the tension of an entire sport on their shoulders. Gennady Golovkin moved first, calm, centered, and terrifyingly composed, the kind of fighter whose aura alone could make an opponent rethink everything. His expression never changed. It was the same look he wore in every fight, unshaken, unreadable, unbothered. Across from him, Curtis Stevens entered with a fire that pulsed through the arena. He wasn't walking toward fear. He was walking toward opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to shock the world and carve his name into boxing history. His stare-down with Golovkin had already gone viral before the bell even rang, a moment frozen in time where two men locked eyes and the world saw violence waiting behind both pairs of gloves. The bell rang, and instantly, the energy in the room shifted. Stevens came out compact, tight, and intelligent, knowing any reckless mistake would get him punished. Golovkin began with measured steps, cutting the ring like a hunter circling its prey, touching Stevens with a stiff jab that didn't just score points, it set the tone. Stevens fired back with a fast left hook that snapped Golovkin's head slightly, earning a smirk, not from arrogance, but from respect. The crowd gasped, feeling the weight of two power punchers beginning a game of chess with dynamite. As the round continued, both men traded moments of brilliance, Golovkin's calculated pressure and Stevens' explosive counterpunching. The audience understood immediately. This wasn't just a fight. It was a collision of willpower, toughness, and raw ambition. And everyone sensed the storm was coming. The second round opened like a warning siren, with Stevens pushing forward just enough to show he wasn't intimidated, yet cautious enough to avoid the traps Golovkin was setting with every step. Golovkin's pressure was silent, almost ghost-like, never wasting motion, never rushing, always closing the distance without needing to run. He jabbed up top, jabbed to the chest, jabbed to the shoulder. Each shot a tool, a measurement, a setup for something bigger. Stevens tried to circle out, planting sharp hooks on angles he hoped would slow Golovkin down. But nothing slowed Triple G. In the middle of the round, Golovkin landed a right hand that carried the sound of a hammer cracking brick. Stevens fell back, his body collapsing toward the canvas in a moment that sucked the noise out of the arena. For a split second, it looked like the fight might be over right there. But then, in one of the most iconic moments of his career, Stevens sat up on one knee, blinked the shock away, and stared directly at Golovkin with a look that said, "I'm still here." The crowd roared, not because he was winning, but because he refused to break. Stevens rose at the count of 8, took a breath, and met Golovkin again in the center of the ring, fighting through danger with heart instead of safety. Golovkin, impressed, didn't rush wildly. He continued stalking, punishing, applying pressure with the calmness of a cold rainstorm that grows heavier with each drop. Stevens made it to the bell, bruised but unbroken, and in that moment, the world realized this fight wasn't just a knockout waiting to happen. It was a battle of spirit against inevitability, courage against destruction, and Stevens wasn't giving up anything for free. Rounds 3 through 6 became a war of attrition where every second mattered, every breath felt heavier, and every punch carried the weight of desperation or dominance depending on which gloves delivered it. Golovkin settled fully into his rhythm, that icy, methodical rhythm that defined his prime years, a style built on relentless pressure and angles that forced fighters into corners they never meant to visit. Stevens tried everything, pivoting out, letting his hands go in short bursts, digging to the body, and aiming sharp counter hooks at Golovkin's chin. Some landed, and when they did, the crowd erupted because each clean punch Stevens landed felt like a message of defiance. But with every counter he landed, Golovkin answered twice as hard. The jab became a weapon of destruction, snapping Stevens' head back repeatedly, not with speed, but with thudding, heavy force that chipped away at his resilience. Golovkin's body shots echoed through the arena like slams against a drum, resonating deeply enough for even the fans in the upper sections to feel them. Still, Stevens' heart refused to crack. He kept fighting back through the pain, throwing his right hand with determination even when fatigue dulled its sting. The rounds turned into a survival test, but also a test of dignity. Stevens was showing the world what it meant to stand against one of the most feared punchers of the era and not get swallowed whole. Golovkin respected his toughness, but never softened the attack. His style was built on inevitability, slow, precise pressure that smothered hope. As the mid-rounds ended, Stevens returned to his corner battered, but still conscious of the fact that the crowd adored him for his bravery. He was losing the fight, but winning hearts. And Golovkin? He was winning everything else. By the 7th round, Stevens knew time was running out. His corner knew it, the commentators knew it, even the crowd knew it. Yet instead of folding, Stevens chose to gamble everything he had left. He came out aggressive, pushing Golovkin backward for the first time, firing combinations with whatever strength remained in his arms. And then came a moment that sent a shockwave through the arena. Stevens landed his best right hand of the fight, a flush shot that momentarily froze Golovkin in place. It wasn't enough to hurt him badly, but it was enough to make him acknowledge Stevens once again. The crowd roared with renewed hope, believing for a few seconds that a miracle could happen. But Golovkin responded in the way only he could. The punch Stevens landed didn't discourage him, it ignited him. He stepped forward, closing the distance instantly, and unleashed a barrage of punches that blended technique, power, and precision in terrifying harmony. His hooks dug into Stevens' ribs, his uppercuts snapped Stevens' chin upward, and his jabs kept Stevens pinned exactly where Golovkin wanted him. Every punch sapped more energy, more resistance, more will. Stevens fought back with grit that bordered on heroic, trying to keep his hands moving even as his legs weakened. But Golovkin was no longer just applying pressure. He was dismantling a man who refused to break. Stevens' back touched the ropes, then the corner, and everyone watching felt the tide shift sharply. Golovkin was no longer hunting, he was finishing. When the bell rang at the end of the 7th, Stevens staggered back to his corner, breathing heavily, his face marked with swelling and fatigue, and for the first time, he didn't answer his trainer's question right away. The storm had grown too heavy. The 8th round carried the weight of inevitability, as Golovkin advanced like a force of nature closing in on its final act. Stevens, battered and brave, attempted to circle out of danger, but his legs had lost their spring, and his guard no longer rose with the same sharpness as earlier rounds. Golovkin sensed the end approaching, not with arrogance, but with the instinct of a fighter who knew how to finish a job. He trapped Stevens against the ropes, delivering a sequence of punches that blended aggression with precision. Hooks collided with the sides of Stevens' head, body shots dug deep into his torso, uppercuts lifted his chin, as if trying to pull the last bits of resistance from his spirit. The crowd stood in a mixture of awe and sympathy, watching courage get overwhelmed by calculated destruction. Stevens still threw back, still tried to show he wasn't done. But his punches no longer carried the threat they once did. They were gestures of defiance, not danger. Golovkin, respectful but ruthless, pushed forward until Stevens' survival became dependent not on his will, but on his corner's mercy. When the bell sounded to end the round, Stevens staggered to his stool, exhausted beyond measure, eyes swelling, breaths shallow. His trainer, Andre Rosier, looked at him, looked into the heart of a warrior who had given everything, and made the decision Stevens himself would never make voluntarily. He stopped the fight. The towel never flew, but the message was absolute. Enough. The referee waved it off, and the arena erupted, not in celebration, but in appreciation for both men. Golovkin had once again proven why he was feared worldwide, and Stevens had proven why he was respected. Two warriors, one victor, and a fight that would live forever in boxing memory.